Howard, it's great to see you today.
Thank you.
So, Howard, you've been very involved in promoting Ukraine and assisting Ukraine since Russia's full-scale invasion began. And you've just returned, actually, from a trip to Ukraine. Tell me, how do you see the situation now in Ukraine?
Well, I think that the guys on the front line are having a tough time. I had an opportunity to spend a little time out east, and they're running low on ammunition. Every place I went, they said Russians are shelling about 5 to 6 to 1. Ukraine can't return the kind of fire that they need to. So I think on the front line, it's really tough, and the U.S. and the European Union need to really make sure they get these packages passed and the support to Ukraine. On the humanitarian side, since the beginning of the invasion, since we started work there, which would have been more like in April of 2022, we've provided funding for over 160 million meals or food kits, food boxes. And it's very frustrating to think that that's how much we've done, because it's frustrating to think about the fact that the need is that great. But that's not slowing down. I think it's going to increase as Russia steps up their aggression, and which they're doing now, as you know. And so I think it's a really tough situation right now across the country, and I think the rest of the world needs to realize it, and I hope that they step up.
So, what was the sentiment? I mean, you've been to Ukraine before. Do you think the people are changing, or the soldiers, how they express themselves? Do you see a loss of optimism, or how do you feel it was?
Well, I think, they're trying to keep their morale up. Every one of them asks, why isn't the U.S. supporting us? And I don't have an answer for that. I don't have a good answer for that. I mean, Ukraine is taking on three of the largest enemies we have in the world, with Iran, North Korea, and Russia. And there's no reason in the world that we shouldn't be giving them 100% of what they need. And we haven't given them what they need up to this point. I mean, they need long-range missiles, and they need, better air support from us. And so, it's a very hard question to answer when you get asked. And so I think, they're frustrated, but, their will to fight is not changed at all. I mean, they are fighting for the freedom of the country and for the democracy that they want to preserve. And so, they're not giving up. They're not slowing down. They're, they still have the same kind of will and commitment they've always had.
How do you think that there's going to be an impasse and U.S. support really might dry up? Or do you think something will come through?
Well, I think even those who are in DC that are opposing passing the package now, there's a great number of them that know that Ukraine needs it and that we need to step up and do it. So the question is, it's all politics at this point, and it's all leverage. So, what can they get? What can the Republicans get from the Democrats in terms of doing something on our southern border that will allow them to feel that they can go ahead and say, let's get the package done. So no one can predict that. Something has to be done on our southern border. So I think at this point, politically, it's very possible that you will see the Democrats do something about the problem on our southern border, which would then hopefully move the Republicans to where they will let the package go through. So I think it's certainly possible, but nobody can predict it.
So when you look back at your own life, you remember the Soviet period, obviously, you remember the collapse of the Soviet Union, and you saw the rise of Putin. What do you see a difference? Would you have expected something like this would have come of Russia?
I visited Ukraine when it was part of the Soviet Union back in 1991, which was interesting to have as a baseline to see what it was like during the Soviet Union. But I think Russia was at one point headed on a little bit different trajectory, and people like Putin, who have spent all their life in the KGB and FSB, and they hate America, they hate the West, and he continues to say that. He says he's fighting this war against the West, not against Ukraine. That should wake some people up in the United States too. So I think understanding Putin and his history, it's not surprising that where we are today. It's always difficult to accept the reality, because you would think that people would be smarter than he has been in terms of invading the country, but he doesn't see it the way we see it. He looks at it completely differently. And so in his mind, he's doing what he should do. He's doing the right thing, and he's determined to be successful. That should scare the hell out of everybody. So, I mean, that is Putin, and that is how he operates. And if he says he's going to do something, he's going to try to do it. And, if he were to defeat Ukraine, it doesn't mean the next day he's going to go into Poland. He's clever and he's patient. And that's even more dangerous because he will wait until the right time to make his next move. Look what he did in Ukraine. He took Crimea and there was very little reaction internationally. I mean, people complained about it, but they didn't do anything. I mean, you have to judge people by their actions, not by their words. And we completely failed when he took Crimea. And he continued to fight for 10 years, trying to move west through Donbass and some other small areas there on the eastern side of Ukraine. And we did nothing. Europe did nothing significant, and so, it's not surprising that Putin is doing what he's doing.
So, as a successful businessman, as you gauge the situation, how do you negotiate with somebody like a Vladimir Putin? How do you deal with someone like that?
Well, you can't negotiate with him. I mean, here, my dad told me something I never forgot. He told me a few things I never forgot. One of them is you can't make a good deal with a bad guy. Putin is worse than a bad guy, and he'll never negotiate in good faith. I mean, look, in 1994, he signed an agreement. So did the United States and the UK, and that they, and Russia signed the agreement, and Russia said they would not invade Ukraine, that they would not impede on their sovereignty, and that agreement doesn't stand today because of where we are. You can't make a good deal with a bad guy. Putin is a bad guy. You can't negotiate him with good faith. This is why the United States and Europe has to make sure that Ukraine completely defeats Russia and pushes them out of Ukraine. That's the only answer.
Your organization is also very active in documenting war crimes and associated atrocities by Russia. Can you talk about that a little bit?
The brutality of Russia on Ukrainians is, I don't think, understood by most people. It's understood by the Ukrainians, but I think it's very hard for people to understand who haven't seen it, lived it, or had their family go through it to comprehend the scale of what Russia has done to Ukraine and Ukrainians. So, we immediately engaged a group that we knew has a lot of a very solid history in this area. And they've been supporting the prosecutor's office in Kyiv. They've been supporting the Kyiv Police Department, the National Police, in investigations. They're doing a lot of training. They're helping in terms of trying to get systems set up to maintain the data, to safely store the data. Just some of the things that have to happen to deal with this. But at the end of the day, the world needs to understand what Russia has done to Ukraine. And I can tell you today, I don't think many people understand it outside of Ukraine and maybe, those who are working closely with it. But, and then one last thing we did was, Project Expedite Justice, who we're working with closely, they came to us and they said, look, one thing that hasn't been focused on enough is the war crimes within agriculture, and we'd like to focus on that. So they have focused on that, and so it's the amount of grain that was stolen, the amount of grain that was damaged, the equipment that's been stolen, the equipment that's been damaged, the infrastructure that's been damaged, all of those things. And there's some great documentation, especially in the first year, showing how much grain Russia stole, how they stole it, how they moved it. Very clever about how they moved some of it. And they actually have put in front of OFAC here in the United States, the information for OFAC to consider sanctions on some Russians. So I think we've made some progress on that. But at the end of the day, it's going to be very hard to prosecute anybody. But you have to have the information. You have to document it, and you have to have it.
So if you were to convey one message to the Ukrainians, what would that message be?
The message is simple: don't give up. The Ukrainian people have demonstrated more resiliency and more commitment to protect their country and to survive than anybody I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I've seen a lot of things in my lifetime. And, as a country, Ukraine has been incredible in terms of their resolve. And the message is, don't stop, don't give up, and stay together. You have to stay together. You know, you have to be unified, and it's really important to be unified. And, you know, I think Ukraine can win this war, but it's gonna require, I know Ukraine can win this war, but it's going to require the right support from the United States and Europe. And so Ukrainians have to continue to send the message out to the rest of the world that they need to hear.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today, Howard.
Thank you.